Okay, so welcome everyone. This is Cesar Trabanco from the Global Chamber. Welcome to our second part of the AI series. They're all led by Jacob Dietz and Yuka Nakasone, two of our members who are um, from different industries, but somehow now involved in AI. And at the end of 2023, we worked together in an event and we said we really need to start a series. So it started last month with a really good roundtable, and this month we're going to be covering AI in global trade, and we have a special guest, Joe Burks from Vigilant GTS. So thank you, Jacob, for taking the lead. I will pass it over to you, and we look forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you, Cesar. Thank you, Global Chamber. And I will give the classic good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our global audience, depending on where you are joining us from today. As Cesar said, I'm Jacob Dietz, the founder and CEO of Climo Collective. And alongside Yuka Nakasone, Executive Director of Global Chamber Barcelona, we're thrilled to welcome you to this edition of the Global Chamber's Let's Talk About AI series focused on AI and global trade. Today, we really stand at the cusp of a new era where artificial intelligence is not just an abstract concept, but a tangible force driving transformation across industries, including the intricate world of global trade. Our aim today in this discussion is to unravel the layers of AI's impact on trade, debunk some myths, and explore the regulatory landscapes shaping its adoption. We have a strong panel, and as always, incredible people in the that are attending in the audience, where this where knowledge and expertise and experience is prevalent. And today, including on our panel, we have Joe Burks, Director of Global Services and Solutions at Vigilant Global Trade Services, and also including some thoughts and ideas and points by Yuka Nakasone, and we might even have a special guest appearance with some occasional insights by Ling Chang. And we're not just here to talk about the current state of AI in trade, to envision its future trajectory and how it can lead to more efficient, transparent, and inclusive global trade practices. So let's embark on this journey of discovery, and may today's dialogue spark new ideas, foster collaboration, and lead to innovations in the world of global trade. I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Global Chamber, for the platform. And let's get started. And I really want to start today. I feel like it's always good to dive into some myths versus realities. And so Joe and others, I'd like to dive into some of these myths, looking at AI versus decision tree and trade, AI and job augmentation, regulatory compliance in AI. And so, Joe, I'd like to pass it over to you to sort of discuss some things you're seeing about AI myths versus reality in global trade.
Certainly, Jacob. Thank you. I mean, again, AI is artificial intelligence, which means it's learning, right? Well, you can't use AI and decision tree in the same sentence because decision tree means it's going to present you with one or more results and you have to select it. And then it's going to present you with one or more results and select it. The problem we run into in trade is most of the AI tools that are out there's a couple of them that are true AI, but most of them are really decision tree based. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's tough to do. Well, understand within trade that part of the doing classification in the US, it's considered doing customs business, and you're given a set of rules in the regulations and things that you have to abide by, which means you have to have a due diligence in place that when you do a classification, you have to understand what the rules are and you have to have a methodical process. So, how does AI work with that? Well, in a decision tree, you're still walking through and accepting each of those answers. and saying, okay, here's how I'm getting my ultimate goal. Whereas a true AI solution is going to take your input and present you with final results. Now, you can take those final results as gospel, but remember, our regulations tell us we've got to do our due diligence. So part of that due diligence is going, yes, I understand the logic and I agree with the logic and accepting it. So if you're looking for AI solutions within the classification or global trade area, it's important to understand that it's going to present you with a solution and say, do you agree with this? And then you're taking your, I agree with it, let's go with it, rather than having to go with a decision tree that's going to walk you through several steps of, well, I need more information. Well, is it this? Is it that? Or pick one of these three that it might be. And that's a big deal within global trade, because the whole idea behind using AI is to increase our job efficiency and the accuracy of what we're doing. Well, if I'm having to slow myself down, am I really creating any efficiency by using a decision tree based system? I know there's people that are going to go, well, Joe, I don't know that I agree with that. Well, the problem that I have is decision tree systems will work great if somebody doesn't know your product. It allows the rank and file to go in and get to some result. But if somebody knows your product, we've actually done tests, and where we know product, I can get to a result quicker by not using a decision tree based system than I can with it. So you have to argue what the value is. With true AI, it's going to go out and look for what you're talking about, the input you're feeding it, and scour the web and return results. And you're going to say, hey, wow, that's great. Let's use this one and go forward with it. So that's one of the key differentiators within global trade and using AI. One of the problems we see is I only know of one or two tools out there that are using true AI. All the rest of them, they call themselves AI, but they're really decision tree based systems. So, what is your value in that based upon using a decision tree versus AI? That's the big question that I see it.
And Yuka, did you want to contribute?
Yeah, I have a question about what exactly you're talking about. Can you explain with an example? As a concept, I really do understand what you're saying, but as an example, maybe decision tree, maybe some of the audience, some of the people who are here don't understand what exactly we're talking about. So if you can expand a little bit, I would appreciate it.
Sorry, Yuka. Yes, I should have started with that. It's when we're talking about classification, it's the harmonized tariff number, HTS, HS, tariff code, whatever you want to refer to it. It's a series of codes developed by the World Customs Organization out of Brussels, that there's roughly 180 countries that subscribe to this nomenclature. And it's the first 6 digits that are supposed to be harmonized throughout the world. And that's what your duty basis is from. So when you look at the government collecting duties, they use this HTS number to assess those duty rates. And the impact is, in the US, it could be duty rate of 0, but depending upon where it's from in the HTS number, you could have 200-300% duty rates on that specific item. Using an AI tool, it's going to say, well, I know what the government says this is. Now let me go and validate that. And it's going to try and assign that tariff number that you're going to use. Now, the whole thing about the government regulations is the government tells you there's what they call GRI, or General Rules of Interpretation, on how to go about getting a harmonized tariff number assigned to your products. There is a tariff number for everything that exists, because there's rules in there that say if two or more tariff numbers are the same and you think they both apply, you have to take the one that's the highest number in the nomenclature. So that means everything has a tariff number assigned to it. I don't care what it is. Then that is going to be your basis for your duties. And that's the key to when you're importing and even exporting. From an export perspective, you have to tell it what that HTS or Schedule B number is. And that's the way the government uses to collect statistics. We all hear countries talk about a deficit of dry goods or the dollar values of goods coming from a certain country. It's these numbers that they use to assess those values based on. So the government collects those statistics and say, if these type of goods we imported more than we exported. But its key function is also to help assess the duty rates. When you look at the duty rates in most countries, the duties are the highest source of income within that country. Therefore, a lot of countries take it very seriously and are going to make sure what you're calling it is correct. A lot of people will want to default to the cheapest duty rate, and regulations are saying you can't do that. You have to go to the correct one. Using AI is what helps you get to that correct tariff number. Does that make sense, Yuka?
Yes, it makes sense. And this is the solution one of the solutions you're offering as a company?
Yes, it is. This is what Vigilant Global Trade Services, we do classification, and we can bring with us a true tool that is truly AI. Now, again, it's not 100% automated because the government regulations say you have to look at that final decision and agree with it. Say, yes, I agree with this, and say, let's go with it. So it's a human physically making a decision, but it eliminates a lot of those research steps that a normal person would have to take.
Wow.
Whereas your rule base or your decision tree is forcing you to go through a series of steps. It's literally a tree based to get to your final results.
Yeah, and how much time can you save by going in with AI solution like that?
Well, there's a lot of variables in there because, again, your AI solution day one may be somewhat slow because it's, as you show in the slide here, it's predictive analytics. It's going to go through and learn your products, and within a short period of time, it's going to get much quicker because it's going to say, wait a minute, you told me before this same description was this classification, so therefore I'm going to use the same logic. Whereas a decision tree doesn't look at historical decisions, it looks at that particular one you're presenting it, and you walk through the steps. So a true AI solution is going to be much, much faster. Now, to talk through that as far as a time-based, most decision tree-based systems will take you between 6 and 10 minutes to actually assign a correct classification. Where your manual processes for most people are going to run right at about 10 minutes per item to review and classify. Whereas AI, the more you use it, the more it learns, it's going to be able to do those within seconds. When you first implement it, may take more time to develop that historical analysis, that predictive analysis. You told me this 2 weeks ago, it's the same description. I'm going to assume it's the same thing. Now, again, one of the things that you have to throw out there is that this is only as good as the data that is presented. Tests that we've done that show you throw it 100 SKUs, you're only going to get somewhere around 50 to 60% that can use an AI driven process, because the descriptions that you're feeding it are not something that it understands. Now, again, being that it's true AI, the adaptive learning, it's going to learn that vernacular that you're using for that part. You told me once before, here's what it was. So now I'm going to learn and automatically assume this is the same thing. That's where the human has to come in and say, I agree with what's happening here, and I make that final decision. The government is going to hold a person and a company liable for wrong classifications. Therefore, they want somebody to make a physical decision.
Even if we use AI, human is the responsible one.
Yes, even if you use AI, somebody has to make a decision to say, I agree with this. So when you're classifying any AI tools, they're going to force that final decision where you have to go, yes, I agree with this and I accept it. It won't automatically just assign it, because that is a problem with your due diligence, that you're showing the proper oversight and the proper care and due diligence.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other question from the audience for that?
Yeah, I'd like to throw that back to the audience too, after what Yuka said, before we move on to our next topic. Does anyone want to have any other questions around AI-driven solutions versus decision tree-based tools in global trade? Sweet. All right. Well, then let's keep rocking and rolling. And this next topic is something that I think we'll all be very interested in. And the maps are more of just placeholders. But this was when we were having a discussion, when Joe, Yuka, and I were talking about this. Really, this idea of AI across borders, and all of the dynamics that are in play are very interesting right now. And so, Joe, I'd love to hear your opinion, your thoughts, any recent news, information about what you're seeing of the global dynamic of AI across borders.
Oh, that's a big one, Jacob. It's one of the things you're seeing from the Biden administration here in the United States is they're concerned about certain countries acquiring the U.S. research and the U.S. technology in order to continue to develop AI. And they're afraid that the development of that AI will start to exceed what the U.S. is doing and cause us problems. So what they've done is they've put large restrictions on the technology, the chips. So the integrated circuits that actually go into AI, because AI is nothing more than a set of computer instructions that it'll build and learn on itself, but it has to run through software programs or run on integrated circuits that cause it to run. It's the microprocessors. So what the US government has done is said, okay, low-end microprocessors that you would find in a standard laptop or something like that, they're fine. But to get to your higher-end microprocessors, you have to apply for a license to export them to certain countries. And they've literally said, presume an assumption, it's an assumption of denial, which means that they're more than likely going to deny the license, depending upon the country it's going to, for that technology. So what you're running into is, well, what happens with that? So right now, the two key manufacturers of integrated circuits are in Taiwan and in Korea. So we all know the dynamics going on in Taiwan, and if you wonder why Taiwan wants to, or China wants to bring Taiwan into its guidance anymore, is a lot of the high-end microprocessors that we're using today are made in Taiwan, and a lot of them are made in Korea. Just saw an article yesterday that the government is offering billions of dollars to a U.S. company that will manufacture the chips here in the United States. Understand on your high-end microprocessors, a lot of the design is done in the US, but they're all manufactured outside the United States. So the government's saying we need to get better at that, and they're offering money, grants, tax breaks, and everything to a company that'll do that here in the United States. So that's the key thing from a technology side. We're seeing a lot of the trade because they're putting so many more rules in place on technology and where it can go. Another rule that they implemented, it's about a year old now. It's called military end use. So you have to know your technology that you're shipping, who it's going to, and you have to know their customer. For instance, you may sell to a university in China, but most of those universities are research universities and they're developing something for the government. So if you sell it to the university and they're developing it for the military or the Chinese military, they're saying, well, you're going to control that. So how does that impact AI? Well, if they can't get the technology to continue to build on AI, how can they continue to develop it?
Yeah.
And that's where you're starting to see a lot of concerns and new regulations and new rules being developed for AI.
Yeah. And by talking to you and Jacob yesterday, I realized that if we talk about AI in global trade, we need to address this because what you said is happening not only the States, but in Europe and in Japan. I saw Japanese companies start to create manufacturers in Japan again, like you said, like semiconductors manufacturers. And here in Europe, they are trying to do the same with the subsided project, create manufacturers to, let's say, provide their own semiconductors, microprocessors within the region, not depending on Taiwan, not depending on Korea, and not exporting the technology to China. So I guess this is something very interesting happening in the global trade area, not just using AI in the global trade, but global trade itself of AI related items is very interesting to watch, I guess, right? So that's what I realized, and I just wanted to share this insight from you, really like something to watch. And tomorrow, the Global Chamber headquarters is having the Semiconductor Summit, right? So please, this is open for hybrid audience as well, meaning virtual audience as well. So please check out the content. And if you're interested in AI, please watch what's happening in this interesting industry, conductor industry, right?
Yeah, and that thank you, Yuka, for and I know I'm going to be attending because it's just that is a field that I am fascinated in, and it's just such it's growing in more importance each day. And sort of staying in this legal landscape. We touched a little bit about some of the political situations. But Joe, I found these points, compliance with data privacy and trade, mitigating algorithmic bias in trade decisions. These other points like ensuring AI safety and liability in trade products. And I'd love for you to pick out maybe one or two that you think are vital for our audience to hear and dive a little deeper into some of these topics that we have up on the screen. Just a few.
Certainly. I mean, we all know GDPR, right? It's global data privacy regulations that exist within the EU. That one is fairly simple. It's whether you're using AI or not, you need to make sure you're GDPR compliant if you're doing business across borders. That one is just as basic as it can be. When you talk about navigating cross-border data flows, this is where I'm most excited about AI. We hear a lot of people talk about blockchain, okay? EDI was the first one, and they said, okay, let's standardize all these flows and let's go to blockchain. I think blockchain is kind of taken a secondary focus now, and you're seeing more and more around using AI around the whole logistics um, movement of goods. So not only from the tracking and the physical movement, your AI can say that, wait a minute, we've seen over history all of these vessel sailings during these months run into more weather pattern issues and always delayed by 3 days, and it gives you better planning solutions. AI is going to take a huge advantage, and I think it's a great thing to allow you to be more predictive in your delivery to your customers because it's going to look at historical data and look at information from each one of these carriers and say, I think this is going to be a good date. Today, there are systems that do that, but it doesn't use AI. It uses numbers that you plug into the system that say, it's going to take me 56 days for them to produce the goods and ship them. Then I'll say 3 weeks to get to the distribution center and 48 hours to put on the shelf and then pick and pack. So it's going to add all those days up and give you like an available to promise date. With AI and using AI, it's going to give you much more succinct and better dates and predicting when goods can be delivered to your customers. And we as consumers, it's something that we demand is that I'm working on something and I need it by X date, so I need to make that decision. And AI is going to really help us with that. So,
Awesome.
unless there's questions on that, when you look at ensuring AI safety and liability in trade products, whether it be in trade products or, any of that, you're seeing more and more companies. And again, I go back to my historical knowledge. I can say 10 years ago, there was not one Consumer Product Safety Commission employee embedded with US Customs. And today there are many. It's last I heard, it was bordering on 3-digit numbers of customs or Consumer Product Safety Commission people embedded with. And why? It's to look at the safety of goods and make sure that the community, the people are protected. And they're going to look at that whether or not they're in its trade or not. AI can help build that safety and liability, but again, it's going to be more of a predictive and tell you things that you should look at for your safety and liability.
Awesome. Yeah, and this is an important topic. And so if there are some questions, I see there's a question, have there been any comparative studies on the degree of improved efficacy of AI predictive analytics in trade over traditional statistical methods? I imagine where it may have more application is on fraud detection. Joe or do you guys have a response to that in the chat?
Well, I think you're starting to see that more and more. The U.S. government in let's pick on Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act. It's a rule that says if you have a cotton shirt that's made in Guatemala, it better not contain Uyghur cotton. So what the government is requiring you to do is tell them where it was made. where the cotton was actually grown. And they have the ability to take a piece of fiber and look at the characteristics of that through their analysis to determine where that cotton was grown. And if it was grown from a Uyghur or from any Uyghur autonomous region that is subject to forced labor, it's going to be denied. And we've actually seen there was a company that brought in 3 containers of shirts made in a Latin American country. The government tested it and found that it was Uyghur cotton, and seized all 3 containers. So where AI is coming into place is they're using better predictive algorithms to determine, okay, if I've got this one, now I know where the supply chain flow is, and it'll start predicting better analysis. The government is trying to collect the data to get to that point. Now it's still I won't say a hot mess, but it's still a lot of, okay, here's what I'm seeing, and has a human decision based on it. They are going to get to the point where they're collecting more data, where they're going to start going through and applying. My prediction here is, rather than using human intervention, they'll allow AI to make some predictions as to whether or not what shipments they should check based upon what they know about the companies that are subject to forced labor within China or within any region. A lot of people think it's just the Uyghur forced labor, but you're seeing more and more cases of forced labor coming up. And in order to keep up with that, you need some type of algorithm or something that's going to help you dig into that. And I'm not seeing any AI tools that look at that point. I do know of one company that is looking at AI. They've got an AI engine, and they're developing that in to help you with your forced labor or any other type of concerns around that point. Does that make sense, Jacob?
Yeah, and I would say your name, but you're on as an iPhone. So, person who wrote that question, how do you, like, if you want to take yourself on mute and respond or add, or would love to hear a reply or anything type of response. Nice. I can read, but if you also want to take yourself off mute and ask the question directly, that's okay as well. And Peter?
Hi, Jacob. I do need to apologize. I'm trying to attend this while at lunch as well. So
Sorry,
if you
Peter.
want to read it for me, I'd appreciate it. I don't want the
Yeah,
background
for
noise.
sure. 100%.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Peter. Yeah.
Appreciate
So,
it. Yeah.
so you said, as a follow-up, how much progress has there been in digitization of data to feed the AI? All of us in trade know how paper-laden the process still is, and there's certainly a lot of potential. Do you have a response to that, Joe?
Huh. Yeah, I mean, you're right, Peter. It's very paper intensive, but as you see, the government is continuing to put rules and regulations in place that say you have to deal with this data electronically. So what we're seeing is they are trying to get to the point to where they can use more AI tools or use more automated tools to crunch the data. That's what you're seeing. I'm not sure they're there yet, but you're going to see more and more of that. There are tools out there that go out and crawl the web and gather this data to be used in your AI predictive algorithms. And it goes out through the web and searches this data. So I don't know that we're there yet, but I do see that happening. And, the government, if you ask U.S. Customs and Border Protection about AI, they'll go, yeah, we know about it. But they're trying to determine where it fits into what they're doing. And I think you're going to find soon that they're going to start using AI and how they track. Just this morning, there was an article on an importer that was fined a couple $1 million for bringing plywood in from China, and it was subject to a 200% duty rate. And they lied about the composition and transshipped it, and cheated the government out of millions of dollars in duties. And they've both been sentenced to jail. It's a husband and wife team, and one of their key workers were all sentenced to jail sentences. AI is going to help do that more predictively. That was done after months of investigation. That actually happened about 3 years ago. AI is going to compress that and allow them to make more predictive decisions much sooner, therefore avoiding that loss of revenue and try and capture these things real time. They are starting slow, but it is happening.
Very, very interesting. And Peter, thank you for your questions and participation. That's very interesting. And you know, it's about optimization, it's about the customer, and it's about, you know, governments making sure that they get their cut. I'd like to sort of transition out of the legal landscape and get into something that I think that we'll all get really excited about in discussing, is sort of looking at where things are going. And so looking at logistics and how AI is starting to really help logistics evolve. And so Joe, I added in you know, the arrows are arrows, but I added in some of these things like, you know, what we talked about yesterday with predictive analytics for container bookings. But what are some of the things that are in the pike or happening right now, that are tied to AI and logistics that you're excited about, that are gonna, you know, really improve things across the board in trade?
Well, I think one of the things that the industry is going to really be excited about is the predictive analytics for container bookings. We all know what's happened in the container industry, and they turn around. The people that owns these vessels will dock vessels to keep the supply tight. Keeping the supply tight means they can drive the costs up. Using, you know, a predictive analytic to book those containers are going to be more and more important. Um, when you look at this, it's like Amazon. People don't understand Amazon is the 8th largest forwarder in the world. Think about that, Amazon. So they actually buy a hold in a container. So if they're not using all those containers, all those spots, what do? It's using that predictive analytics that's going to go and look and say they can put 300 containers in this slot, but they've only got 250 booked. Let's go out and help sell those other 50 bookings. That's going to be good because it creates more value for the industry in getting your goods. We already talked about real-time shipping and tracking. So that's going to be something that you think you're seeing more and more of, and it's going to be come into play. Even with the automated demand forecasting, once you start getting these other things, the predictive analytics, the dynamic routing, the real-time shipment tracking, that's going to help in the automated demand forecasting. The demand, because what it's going to allow you to do is it's going to allow the systems to say, wait a minute, I see that this vessel had to divert to another port, or I see that this plane had an engine failure, and it's going to automatically update those demand. But I love your chart here, Jacob, because it shows that automated demand forecasting is key, but you have to get those other ones in place in working before you can do that. Even the dynamic routing optimization is going to go in and it's going to look at and say, well, I don't have any empty slots in this vessel that's going out of Shenzhen, but if I decide to take it down to Hong Kong on this date, I can catch a sailing a week earlier. Now, again, I understand that you've got tax issues within the government, but your dynamic routing optimization is going to assist with that, and you can make those decisions before the container hits a port and know which port to route it to automatically.
I guess with this AI solutions, other technologies like IoT, yacht, or blockchain needs to be developing just next to these. How do you see that? For example, tracking the goods, tracking the containers, tracking the goods, real time. It needs lots of technologies, including sensors, including uh, data center, including everything else, right? So how do you see this developing with other technologies, not just AI?
Well, certainly you could IoT or Internet of Things is things that we see today. I can go out today and buy a sensor and put it in a container and see every place it goes to, when it gets there, when it stops, how long it's been there. So you can do that. The problem is the cost of those sensors, those IoT sensors. You have to have very valuable cargo in order to make them pay for themselves. One time in a past life, we had a commodity that was had a high pilferage rate. And we looked into being able to do that because when we would send them into Mexico, those containers would disappear. The problem we run into is that the cost of these sensors and to pay for that tracking, it was difficult to justify the trade-off. But you are seeing that IoT happen today. Now,
Mhm.
with blockchain is it's different in the sense that it's an EDI basically. It's like EDI on steroids. So if I was doing blockchain and I, as a global trade services provider, anything that's in the blockchain that regards the classification, it would say I'm the owner and not allow any intermediary to change that without working with me. So blockchain gives you that control over who owns what data and where it owns. So, Shauna, EDI is electronic data interchange. It is the ability based upon certain formats. EDI 110, and you even get into, whether it's an EDIFACT or European standard or an American standard. A 110 is a shipment notification standard. So that's where the carriers will process that data and send it into your system so you can see that it's shipped and it has that data in there. So when you're looking at using blockchain, it's not going to use the EDI. It's going to use another format, the blockchain format, but it's going to control the owner. With an EDI transmission, I can go in and change any of the data in that EDI format as long as I have access to the systems. With blockchain, it's going to say this data is owned by this person and only this person can change it.
Do you see in any future the current EDI is going to blockchain or it's impossible?
Um, I hesitate there because I did some work in blockchain. It was working with a group of people trying to, rather than developing EDI standards for global trade, is jumping into the blockchain standards for trade. But it's been a while since I've been involved in that. I know it's developing, but I think you're going to see blockchain start to go by the wayside because everybody's doing AI, and AI is going to allow you to do that. With with EDI, if you don't fill in a field, it's going to send that data anyways, unless you've told it to predict or to say, hey, this has to be filled in. With blockchain, it's going to say, well, wait a minute, this field is blank and I know it's needed. So let me get to the owner of that data to do that. With AI is going to jump both of those and go, wait a minute, these goods are on the way and I see these data fields missing. Therefore, I need to find out who the owner of these fields are and get that data in the transaction before the goods physically leave the country, allowing a much smoother flow in there. Blockchain does a little bit of that, but it doesn't do it to the degree that AI can.
Okay, it's very interesting. So, because I see blockchain is a little bit difficult due to the fact that it uses so much energy, so much processing power that we can't really practically use because we need hardware, we need data center, we need quantum computing. Otherwise, it's kind of stuck, right? So, sorry, you
Yeah,
still
no,
can, yeah.
Yuko, with AI, you've got to have that quantum computing as well.
Mm.
So with blockchain, it's the term they use, it's distributive in the sense that it'll hit, because if it knows I'm the person for the HTS number, it's going to come to my servers if I'm working in blockchain and say, do I have this classification? If not, alert somebody. But it's done within my systems. And with blockchain, it's distributive because it takes the segments that are owned by certain countries, certain companies, certain individuals, and prompt them for that data. With AI, you still got to have that same quantum computing, probably even more, because it's going through and scanning that transaction and saying, wait a minute, this is going to cause a problem or this is going to be an issue. Let's go and alert people up front. But you still got to have that same quantum computing, the same high-end processors to be able to handle that.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
it,
we have about 13 minutes left in the hour. And so, we sort of touched base on overcoming logistics challenges in that last slide. And so I want to close with a discussion on some nice shoes, but no, really on some ensuring compliance through AI. And Joe, we talked a lot about near the end of our chat yesterday about compliance. And I know we touched base on a little bit of compliance throughout the presentation, but I'd like you to sort of close at least our content portion before we get into questions about some closing thoughts on compliance.
Yeah, sure, Jacob. It's like you say in here, they can analyze data, large databases, but it's restricted party information. Today, they call it either sanctioned party screening or restricted party screening, or there's a dozen different things. It's KYC or know your customer. You heard me talk about a military end use in the example there. You heard me talk about the forced labor. Within sanctioned party screening and restricted party screenings, it means the person you're selling those goods to or you're buying those goods from, they want to make sure that they're not a drug lord somewhere in the world, or you're not using goods to be part of a terrorist network. So what restricted party screening does is it forces you to look at that party. But what we're seeing through the KYC or know your customer is you have to know who your customer's customer is. And what that basically means is that a common way of money laundering is to buy bulk goods, ship them into a country, and sell them. So you can import that product and bring those goods in. Problem is who is it that's really selling those goods? Who is it they're selling them to? And with AI is getting much better at doing that. For people that do a large amount of orders, you're going to find that the screening that happens is very cumbersome because it forces you to stop and look at a transaction based upon numbers of characters that match in a word or number of words that match in a string or in an address. Where you run into problems is you look at the Arabic language. in many cases, there's no one-to-one comparison in English to some of those characters. So an A could be an E, it could be an I. So what they do is these screening solutions use these algorithms. Well, to take it to the next step, they're applying AI and saying, well, there's no way I know who these people are. They're a valid entity. I see their business registration. To do that from a systemic standpoint today takes a lot of cycles to develop that. With AI, it becomes much easier because the AI can go out and validate that it will go out and validate that business and that address. So therefore, it's going to make screening much, much easier, much more predictive, and help with the end with that screening and making it um, less restrictive in the sense. Now, again, there's no laws saying you have to screen those transactions. The law says you can't do business with that person. So you better screen those transactions so you're not making a shipment that could cause you grief down the road.
Awesome, awesome. And I just saw we have a question on the chat, and I'd love for them to come off mic. David, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you. Yeah. So the question that I had was, and I kind of took this off the fact that you just said Arabic to English, and there's not exactly like a one for one. So didn't mean to go too far off topic here. But do you believe that AI will ever be able to truly capture beyond just the word for word translation, and be able to capture meaning or the artistic sense behind that? And I say that just because, if you take let's say a high school essay, right, and you put it through Google Translate. I'm just putting this as an example. When I was in high school, the last thing you wanted to do was put it through Google Translate because there was just no way between English and Spanish, back then. But we're talking that was probably like 2007 or so. Now you put it through Google Translate, and occasionally you have a couple of things if you know the language where you just have to remove a word. So, for example, it'll conjugate in the formal sense as opposed to the informal sense, or whatever it may be, but it's pretty close. The point is that it's mainly there, but not quite. But then the question is, if you look at, for example, Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling, right, which is essentially a children's novel, do you think that it will ever be able to capture the hidden meanings behind that, or the subtleties of what a human can create, and be able to generate it into something that becomes more than just perhaps an academic type of essay that has a series of, or that has a wealth of data that you can put on there, where the language is going to be pretty standard? I know that's kind of a longer question, but thank you.
Well, let me try and answer some of that from my perspective. Is what you're seeing is AI is a predictive. It's going to go out and learn.
Okay.
So the idea is when you see whether it be your double byte or your kanji characters or any of your Korean, Taiwanese, Chinese, Japanese, it's going to start to look at those and develop. AI is going to learn, and it's going to build that repository that says, hey, you know, here's what I've seen, and I think this closely matches this. Do I think
Okay.
it's ever going to get 100%? No, David, but I think you're going to see that it's going to start to get close. But
Okay.
remember, when AI sees something, true AI is learning, which means it's going to have to learn what that's doing. And once it's taught that, it then uses that for the very next example. It's going to get better, but I don't
Yeah.
know that it'll ever be 100%.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, privy to what you said earlier on the call, how AI ultimately is going to make a lot of, I guess, menial tasks or simpler tasks a lot more efficient, right? I think there's no doubt about it. There's nothing nicer than being able to, get on a call with someone and have, your auditor or whatever it may be come on, and all of a sudden it transcribes the whole thing for you, so that when you have to go into your CRM and you have to put in your notes, you don't have to go back and retype everything,
Right,
you've
right.
already done, and just in case you miss something, the nice part is that it takes what it says and it puts it on there. But I was really curious to know just kind of to what degree of specialization it'll get to. And it's me being a writer myself, I'm kind of glad that AI can't necessarily match what a human can write. Hoping I don't end up losing a job sometime. But thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
Any
thank you,
questions,
David.
right?
And I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up and then close out so we can all see each other and then have some more Q&A sessions. But as we wrap up today's enlightening discussion on AI and global trade, I want to express my gratitude to my incredible co-moderator, co-host Yuka Nakasone, and for the exceptional panelist, our guest Joe Burks, for your invaluable insights, and to you, of course, our audience, for your engaging participation. Today's conversation has underscored the transformative impact of AI on global trade, from revolutionizing logistics to ensuring compliance and navigating the intricate landscape of international laws and regulations. As we continue to explore the vast possibilities AI offers, let's remain committed to responsible innovation and ethical practices. I'm excited to, as you can see on the screen, I'm excited to invite you to our next few series of Let's Talk About AI, where we'll dive into the world of large language models like ChatGPT, and then followed by a special Earth Day focused debate. I don't know why I put a quote on Earth Day, on AI and climate. And so your continued engagement and curiosity are really what drive these conversations and discussions forward, paving the way for a future where AI not only enhances global trade, but does so in a way that is inclusive, equitable, and sustainable. I want to thank you once again for joining us. And I look forward to continuing the journey together in our next sessions. And I'd like to now open this up, close this down, and open this up for any more questions or comments from the crowd.
Jacob, this is Cesar. I just want to, follow up with your words and thank you, Yuka and Joe for the amazing information. Yuka did mention about the semiconductor summit that's happening tomorrow. I just put the link there in the chat. It is a hybrid event, so it's a virtual piece to it. So you're all welcome to join us tomorrow, Friday. And so yeah, just wanted to mention that. And if there's anyone that wants to connect with someone who was here in the call today, feel free to reach out. And we certainly will look forward to the next event in the series. And Joe, I look forward to learning more about you, the company, and I thought about about one of our members in Florida that might be a good connection for you. So I'm gonna follow up on that.
I'd love to get to know him, Cesar.
Awesome. On that note, is anything else? Any final words from Yuka or Joe?
I just shared my profile in the chat because David asked about the language AI. This is what I've been doing for about 25 years. So I can answer with what Joe said was a good answer, but I can expand if anybody wants to know about it. And I'm doing both voice and text, and implementing AI solutions for language exchange. So it's a pretty exciting space, so let me know. Thank you.
And one final shout out to Nii Sanusi, just for we'll be one session in the next few months will be around the legal sector in AI, and I know Nii is doing a lot of work right now to really see how AI is creating an impact in the legal sector, and so I'm excited to explore that with you, Nii. And so. All right. On that note, sort of perfect timing. Thank you all for attending our second Let's Talk About AI session, and I feel like it was awesome. I learned a ton. I appreciate y'all's engagement, your questions. Joe, thank you so much for your insights.
My pleasure.
Very valuable, and I want to wish everyone an awesome rest of your week, a great weekend, and we'll see you when we see you next.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.